Good morning, everybody.
How's it going?
Welcome to another episode of the Pentecast podcast.
Yes.
We do have a confession to make. We have left the grand state of Georgia.
We are on the run, folks. We are no longer in the state of Georgia. We are in the wonderful, wonderful, gorgeous, beautiful state of Virginia. And some of you might be wondering, what are you guys doing outside in suits in September? We're not in Georgia, so we can do that now.
That's right.
It is absolutely stunning where we're at. We're so excited for us to share this testimony that we've been looking forward to. My goodness, how long have we been looking forward to this? For quite some time.
3 or 4 months.
Yes. We have none other with us, and actually we're with him, Brother Danny Reed. Welcome so much to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Yes. This is the first time that we've met Brother Danny, and we were in service with you in your church, and we just had a wonderful service, wonderful time, and he was so gracious to open his pulpit to us and let us testify, and we do thank you for that. We don't take that lightly. We do appreciate it. Gave us an opportunity to kind of talk about what the podcast is all about, and so we had planned to record your testimony. And Brother Danny had this wonderful idea, because I was thinking, maybe we're going to be in a social hall.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to be in the foyer. I don't know where we record these things everywhere. But as people can tell, the ambient noise and also the view, if you're watching on YouTube right now, Brother Danny says, hey, why don't we do it outside?
Yeah.
And I said, what a amazing idea. Because, folks, I wish I could just do a panoramic view of where we're at. We're in the middle of the mountains, and it is absolutely gorgeous. If you know me by now, I love the mountains. I love the mountains.
Indeed, it is beautiful.
But this isn't about me and my love for mountains. So,
No.
Brother Danny, thank you so much for letting us come and share your testimony with the rest of the world. So let me give the viewers a backdrop on how we even met and how this was possible. Your daughter and her husband had their family down at Savannah when we did the Q&A for the college. And after they left that day, she emailed me and sent me just a snippet of your testimony and said, hey, I thought maybe that you would like to hear part of my dad's testimony. And whenever she sent it to me, Brother Danny,
yes,
I directly messaged Ryan, and I said, get this. And the only thing that he texted me back was, when are we going to Virginia? And I said, soon. And so here we are today on Labor Day weekend. We shot up here. Wives aren't here, so we're kind of in the doghouse. But if this is the kind of doghouse I'm in, I'm kind of glad that I'm there. So welcome. Where does it all begin, Brother Danny?
Okay, thank you, Brother Andrew and Brother Ryan, for coming up for this testimony. And I guess where I want to start at is, my name is Danny Reed. I grew up in Montgomery County, Virginia, which is near Roanoke, Virginia. And I never grew up in church. I never had a deep background in church, especially a holiness church. But the one thing I do remember is, as a lost person at the age of 19, I was going to college, and I had other plans, and I was living a very ungodly, wicked life. And one day out to myself out in the field, I took my 69 VW Bug, and I laid my .22 pistol across it, and I was going to shoot a glass pop bottle out of a fence post. And in behind that was a apple orchard that, I don't know, it may have been 200 or 300 yards deep. And my brother, I only have one brother, it's 4 years younger than me, and he normally he never went in behind those trees, and it was just a freak accident. But before I was going to shoot the pistol, I had some hollow points in the pistol, and it seemed like a voice spoke to me as an unsaved person. It's like a voice spoke to me and said, take those hollow points out and save them for squirrel hunting, and put round nose in. And anybody that knows anything about guns know that hollow points are more destructive than a round nose bullet is, or a full metal jacket. And so I did. I actually took them out of my revolver pistol, and I laid the pistol across the VW Bug. I shot one time at the pop bottle, and I missed. And then up to my left, a couple hundred yards or better, my brother came down out of the field, and he kind of doubled over, and he said, "You shot me." Ooh. And I said, "I shot you? How did I shoot you?" And what happened, it was so ironic, is it was just such a miracle, because as he was walking, we're talking about 300 yards through trees and brush, and this one bullet would pop him right up under the rib, right near the heart. And it would actually, we didn't know at the time, but it would actually hit a rib. It would ricochet. It would go an inch under his heart. It would go through his lung and lodge in behind the fatty tissue of his hip, which is there still yet today. And so that little episode that I had all by myself.
Wow.
God seemed to deal with me as a center boy, and that's where I first felt the Spirit of God drawing me as I drove him to the hospital in a 69 VW Bug going 85 miles an hour and could have easily killed us. I got him to the hospital without harm, and come to find out it was a miracle. I thought he was going to die on me because I saw the bullet wound. It went in, it never came out, and I thought it was up in his chest cavity, but it had hit the rib, and it had ricocheted. And from that time on, I would lay down in the house, and I lived near the Radford Army ammunition plant in Radford, and they would have explosions, and I would think, the world's coming to an end, the Lord's coming back. And I had this great fear on me. So God started working with me and pulling with me, and one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I walk in the back of this little homeless church, and I get saved. Okay?
Wonderful.
At the age of 19, I got saved. So that's where it all began. I had plans to go out west. To this day, I've never been west of the Mississippi. But I had plans to go there. And
God foiled your plans, it sounds like.
God changed my plans. So that's where it started. But to the main part of the testimony that you came here today for was the Virginia Tech Massacre that happened on April the 16th, 2007. I think it's one of the worst school shootings probably in U.S. history. And as we see, I know as a child when I grew up, I went to school in a 2-room wooden schoolhouse. And I remember as a child that we didn't have school shootings. I remember as a high school student in Blacksburg, Virginia, that we would cruise around in our trucks, hauling our shotguns and rifles in the back of our trucks, and we didn't have school shootings. But now we have an epidemic of school shootings.
Right.
Not only do we have a pandemic, we have an epidemic. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is we've left God out of all of it. But let's go to 4/16, the morning of April the 16th, 2007. This is 3 years after we started this church that we're at right now. I was a laboratory manager at Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia, in the College of Engineering. And what we do is we train engineers. We train engineers. I had been in one facility, a building up, and that facility had been closed down. They were moving me back into Norris Hall, and I was in transit, basically. I could have easily been in the other building, but I wasn't. I was starting to move things down in Norris. If you've ever seen pictures of Norris, it's an L-shaped building. It's a 3-story building with a basement under it. And I don't know, the day of the shooting, there may have been maybe 300 or 400 people in that building. I'm not sure. It houses quite a few people. It's a large building. But the morning of April the 16th, 2007, I got up as normal, and I'm not an early bird, so I just kind of hop out of the bed, put some water on my face, and hop in my clothes, and I'm out the door. And I remember that morning that I usually have a cup of coffee in my favorite little mug.
Well, now you have a new favorite mug.
I have a new favorite mug, but it needs to be splash proof. Okay, this one was splash proof, and it still got me in trouble. But as I got my cup of coffee, I went to my wife and I kissed her goodbye for that day. And as the old saying is, you never know what another day holds forth.
Right.
So as I started out, I was driving a 1969. I'll be descriptive here. I was driving a 1969 Ford Mustang. It was an older car, had a lot of miles on it that I'd bought for my daughter that had went to college, and I had bought her a little clunker car. So I was driving that little clunker car as a 69 two-door Mustang. And as I live up in the mountains, okay? I live on up in the mountains here from the church, and we have about a mile of private road, 1-lane private road. And normally you're only going 5, 10, 15, 20 mile an hour on that road. You're not doing fast on this little narrow gravel mountain road that leads to our house that goes through our private property. So I came out that morning, that little Mustang. I got down next to the what we call going on to the hard top or the state entrance right up the road here. And when I got there were some potholes where the rain had made huge potholes in the road. I was going about 10 mile an hour, and that's not speeding, I don't think. And going 10 mile an hour, here's where the miracle took place, or one of the miracles, okay, is I swerved to miss a pothole, and when I did, I lost control of my Mustang, okay? And it threw me out of the road. I went out of the private road, over kind of like an embankment, and down into a brush pile. Literally a brush pile where people had brush stacked, one of the neighbors. So I get in there, and I'm sitting up cockeyed. My coffee's done spilled all over me. I cannot get out the driver's door, so I start to get out the passenger's door. When I get out the passenger door, I kind of scoot over, get out, and there I am with my coffee all over me, and my car's down in a brush pile, and I'm kind of getting in the state of Jonah right now. I'm very angry, okay? Yeah. I don't mind telling you, I'm very angry.
Right.
A little upset, and I'm down in the brush pile. I get out, and here comes my nephew up the road, and he says, Uncle Danny, do you need help? Well, at this point, I'm so upset, I said, no, I don't need help. I was wanting to do it by myself. So as I walk on foot, almost a mile back up to my house, I get my old 1959 Massey Ferguson tractor with a logging chain. I come down, I literally grab that Mustang by the bumper, and not very carefully, but I aggressively yank it out of the brush pile. Well, I go back, I park my tractor, I walk back, and we're talking about 3/4 mile here, back and forth.
You done got your exercise for the morning.
By then, I had woke up. I woke up. And so I get my Mustang, and I start it up. It's clattering. It sounds like it's going to fly to pieces. I thought, what have I broke? I've messed up my car. I've broke something. So I took it back home. I got in my 92 white Ford Ranger 4-drive pickup, and off to work I went that morning, not knowing what was going to happen. And as I get in Blacksburg, by then the parking there at the campus is horrible. So I had to park on the outside perimeters way out and walk way in. And I remember it being, it was a chilly, windy, cold morning that had snow flurries in the air. I remember that vividly. And as I went into Norris Hall, I was running about 2 hours and a half late at this time for my job. We had classes set up we were going to teach. Here I am running late. They're expecting me, so I literally run through the door at Norris. Norris has 3 entrance doors. I run through the side toward Burris Hall, and actually there's 2 sets of doors there. There's an entrance door for pedestrians, and then there's another door where it goes into a shop where they use forklifts to get equipment and things like that in and out. It's more of a protected. It's not an easement, okay? So I literally run into Norris, jerk the door open, run in, and getting ready to have class. And as we were getting ready to have class, I threw my keys, my jacket, onto my chair. I go up into the laboratory where we're setting up the classes, and as I go to the laboratory, I get up to the front of the classroom, and I open this door that goes into the hallway where students come in and out. So that particular lab would have about 25 students that day is what we would have. We would have 25 coming in. I think it was by maybe 10 o'clock or something like that the lab started. I got in Norris about 9:30 that morning, and I think I had been there maybe 5 minutes or so until the doors were chained shut that I didn't know. I think the shooting started about 10 minutes later at 9:40. But as I sat there right in front of the door at a computer and a test machine, I was sitting there checking my emails real quickly. And as I checked my emails, I see all these bomb threats. These bomb threats had led up to this day, and we didn't know it, but I think that was the perpetrator's purpose was kind of beat the drums and start getting some anxiety up before the attack. And as I sat there, I didn't know it until the aftermath of it, but the guy had literally came past the door within probably 10 or 15 feet of me and could have easily taken me out, okay? But he didn't want me. He started on one end of the building, and he's chained. He took a new chain. He put a chain on a lock. He put a bomb note on the outside of the door, and he literally came by me, chained another door that I just came through, and then he went down to the other end of the hall and he chained the last door, and then he headed upstairs to the classroom where each classroom had like 25 or 30 kids, and I think it was like 7 classrooms on that wing, and that's where he wanted to be, okay? But on my part, from my perspective, as I sit there typing and checking emails, I got this uneasy feeling. You know, it's just like something wasn't right that day. And all of a sudden across the hall was this grad student. He was an Indian grad student, and he got up because I had worked with him, knew him, but he got up, and all of a sudden I heard him slam his door. And it sounded like he took it off the hinges, and I thought, wow, what's going on here? I mean, he slammed that door. And I thought, now something's not right here, okay? It seemed like something started telling me, Brother Andrew, that something's wrong here. Something's amiss here. There's trouble in the air. I just felt like God was dealing with me to be uneasy here. So I get up and go outside the door. I run down the hall, and I think, you know, what's going on here? And as I do, one of the guys I work with, he stepped outside of his office because he was on the other side of the building, and he made one comment, and he said, I hear gunshots. I didn't hear gunshots because I was on the other side, but he did, and he heard gunshots because he had his window open. And I thought, well, this is strange, gunshots. Then that started getting my anxiety up, okay? And to this day, the anxiety that was in that building at that time, this guy that told me that he stepped out in the hall and told me, he said, I hear gunshots. To this day, he said, I never remember telling you that story.
Really?
Yes. And so
his adrenaline was just pumping.
Adrenaline. It was like a shock. And so as he told me there was gunshots, all right, I don't do good in tight places, a little bit claustrophobic.
Join the club.
Which comes to my advantage in this situation, okay?
Yes, sir.
I go to running down the hall at this time. I start to run toward the hall. These are long halls. They're real long buildings. And as I run, I kind of at a trot go down toward the hall, and here's this guy out of the dean's office that come off 3rd floor. He's at the snack machine, and he just casually says, they got a lockdown. And I thought, well, there's another flag. Something's going on here, okay?
Yeah.
And so as I go down to the door, the exit door, I was going to go to the exit door. As I go to the exit door, I open up the foyers, which I'll always remember. I see a shiny chain with a shiny lock, and it's locked. These doors were solid. There were no windows in them at the time, and they had handlebars that you could wrap a chain around and chain it shut. It's not like a lot of mechanisms they have today. In fact, Virginia Tech used millions of dollars to change all their doors after this attack.
Really?
And so there was this chain. I couldn't get out. And the guy at the snack machine said, we're locked in. That just didn't go right for me. I said, something's wrong here. I don't want to be locked in. Somebody has not done something right here. So all of a sudden, Brother Andrew, this is where I think the Spirit of the Lord helps me. It's like the Bible says, the angel of the Lord grabs you by hand and leads you out. Yeah. And the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. I could have went about 3 different directions at this moment. I'm talking about split seconds. I could have gone 3 or 4 different directions. I went one direction. I go through a door. I go through a machine shop. I dodge all these saws and lathes and mills and things like that, and I'm running for my life. And as I get back to that one door that I told you before, it was like a freight door where they get forklifts and things in. That door was not a passenger door. It was locked from the inside. It was always a mechanical mechanism. It locked it from the inside, and we always kept it locked from the inside. And a guy told me before the attack, he said, I heard somebody grab the door and shake it, okay? He didn't chain that door because that door only had one latch on the outside. It did not have 2. He couldn't do it, okay? It would have been more obvious, but he knew that door was locked because he done cased the building. So I couldn't get out, so I go back to that door, and it has like a mechanical mechanism. It's like a square metal tubing, and you take that tubing aside, and you go out the door. And that's what I did. I took it out, went out the door, and later on, they actually gave me that part of the metal door, or the tubing, as a souvenir, which I kept at my home because I laid my hands on that, and that was my way out of this distress. I was the only one to get out of that door. In fact, there was only 2 of us in the whole building that got out of the building. Everybody else got trapped in, okay? It was me. I got out that door. A custodian got out under a tunnel. And other than that, there was nobody that exited that building during this massacre. And the one thing I do remember is I back up here a little bit. When I was in the foyer and I saw the chain lock and I knew we were chained in, the one thing I do remember, I hearing a noise to my left up toward the classrooms. And this noise, it sounded like a multitude of people. It sounded like screams that all bonded together. And it was so eerie. And I knew that something was wrong. This was shortly after the tower attacks, the terrorist attacks. And the first thing that popped through my mind is, it's just a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And so I got out of the building. As I went out, I opened up the exit door, and I heard loudspeakers. And it said, this is an emergency, stay inside all buildings. This is emergency, stay inside all buildings. I only dwelled there maybe about 1 to 2 seconds. I had a decision to make. Do I go back in, or do I go out and run for it? And all of a sudden, it's just my instinct. I went outside and started running for it. I flung the door open, I flicked it shut, and I heard this emergency, it's emergency out here. Stay inside all buildings. Well, I didn't know where the shooters were at. I didn't know if they were going to shoot at me. And so I go outside the building, and as I go, I start yelling and screaming, gunshots in the building. Gunshots in the building. What I didn't know later is people up on the 2nd, 3rd floor would have their office windows open. They would hear me yell that. In fact, I had one professor come to me afterwards during the funerals, and he told me, he said, Danny, he said, I want to thank you. He had tears in his eyes, and he said, I want to thank you because he said, you yelled so loud going out. He said, I was getting ready to go out and check on it, and I went back and locked myself in, and he said, you saved my life. You saved my life. And so as I went out yelling, I went toward what we call Hancock. It's another building. I was really running toward my truck, toward the parking lot, but you've got to get through buildings to get there. And the things I remember is I think there was a CNN clip. They tell me, I haven't seen it, they tell me that there was a CNN clip of somebody running. And actually, I was just right after that. I had just missed that. I think there was a CNN reporter on campus that soon. We're talking about minutes, okay? And as I ran toward Hancock, I remember seeing the police cars coming in. There were county police cars. I remember seeing them come up the steps. And the thing that I remember is they had their guns out, shotguns, rifles. And I remember seeing a very serious look on their face. They had this serious look. And I got down behind a concrete column is what I did. I squatted down behind a column, and I throwed my hands up, and they're pointing rifles at you, okay? They're pointing rifles at you because they don't know who the perpetrator is right now. They don't know who the shooter is. And I remember seeing this one girl. She was a student. She had a big backpack on her back, and she was so frightened that she automatically just plastered herself on the concrete, face down with her arms like that, and waited for the cops to come by. So as the cops came by, I went on toward my car. As I went on toward my car, it was my truck at the time. It was class change time. All of a sudden, it's these herds of these hundreds of thousands of students that's headed to campus to class. And all of a sudden, I get pretty aggressive with it. I throw my hands up, I shout at them, and I said, go back. I said, go back. I said, turn around. I said, there's shooters in that building. I said, there's a terrorist attack. There's something bad going on. And most of them stopped just like that. They stopped. Except one guy. And one guy said, oh, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. I looked him right straight in the eyes, and I said, this is not a joke. I said, this is serious. I said, go back. Yeah. And so I tried to warn people, and then I went on to my car and my truck, and as I went on to my truck, the thing I remember, I got to my truck, my keys were locked up in my office. I couldn't get back in. We never got back in the building, I think, for a month. I mean, I lost all my keys, everything I had was there, and it's there safe, so I couldn't get in my truck.
So you had to fix the Mustang.
Right. I did that later. I'll tell you about that later. But I couldn't get in my truck, and I didn't have a way in. I had it locked. I thought, how am I going to get in? So here I am standing out there in the parking lot. I remember this very vividly. The wind was blowing. The snowflakes were horizontal. It was cold. It was chilly. It would bite your ears off. It was that kind of day because it was so windy they couldn't get the helicopters down to do the emergency evacuations is how windy it was. And so I remember it being that cold, and I'm just sitting there shaking. And one thing, I'm shaking with adrenaline and a little fear. The other thing, I'm shaking because it's cold. And all of a sudden, here comes this boy up in a car. He looks at me, and he says, "You need help, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "You need help." He said, "What do you want me to do?" So God sent me my Good Samaritan, okay? God sent me my Good Samaritan. I entered a state of shock. And you say, well, you really entered a state of shock for that. Yes, I did. But as I sat there, that Good Samaritan, he said, where can I take you? And I said, well, take me to Kroger. Take me to Kroger. I got out Kroger. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. I got out Kroger, and I got the manager, and I called my wife, and I told her to come and get me at Kroger. And the thing I remember is after she came to pick me up at Kroger, she came in there, and she said, "Honey," and when she did, I just stared. And I didn't know it at the time, but she told me, she said, "You were just staring. You were not." I was in shock.
Yeah.
And so she drove me home, and I remember coming home as I was leaving Blacksburg. All the emergency stuff was getting in. That's how God got me out.
Wow.
That morning on second floor where it all happened, I should have, by all rights, should have been there, could have been there had I been on time, because we have labs, we have classes, I do inventory, we do surplusing, we have mailboxes, we have copy machines, a lot of our stuff, and we track it through there a lot. We track through there a lot, and I could have and should have been there, except I had my Mustang in a brush pile that delayed me 2.5 hours.
That was a God thing.
That was a God thing. That was a God thing. That was a thing that I got upset about. That's the thing, as I spilt my coffee, couldn't get out, yanked my car out. That was the thing. I was upset, but what I didn't realize is God was taking care of me that day, and I didn't have sense enough to know that, okay?
Yeah.
And had it not been for that, I could have easily been a casualty, easily been. Because in that building that day, if I'm not mistaken, there were like 30 people shot and killed. There were, I think there was almost like 30 or some wounded. I mean, it was definitely a massacre.
It was awful.
In that building. So after I came home, I went into shock, really. I really went in shock. My mind went numb. The job would call me up. They say, "We want to send you to a counselor." I don't need no counselor. I don't need no counselor. Brother Mike Roberts called me on the second day. On the second day of this, I never will forget it because of 3. The second day, Brother Mike Roberts called me, and he said, he left me a message on my phone because I didn't get it live. And he said, "Brother Danny," he said, I am praying that you find peace of God in your heart." Brother Ryan, this is what I thought. What are you talking about? I don't need no peace. I don't need no peace. I was literally in a state of shock, and now I know what that is. And also, not only shock, I also know what it feels like to have the guilty syndrome of being a survivor, okay?
Right, yeah.
As I survived that, I really felt, I'll tell you what the feeling feels like. It feels like you're dirty, you're gritty, you're terrible because you survived and they didn't.
Yeah.
And but
That's
there was nothing we could do, okay?
Yeah.
We were unarmed. We were sitting ducks. But as I sat at my home, I remember this on the third day after the massacre. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, sitting at my dining room table, that the Spirit of the Lord came down, and that angel of peace, he came down and he gave me that victory. And I sat there on my table and I cried it out. Gaina, my wife, she came over, she put her hand on my shoulder, and she comforted me. But that's when, right there, that the Holy Ghost, God, the Spirit, that's when he healed my mind right there, okay? And I got over that. And afterwards, when President Bush and Senator Kane, I believe it was, took the helicopters to go to Blacksburg to do the commencement speech or whatever speech they were there for these victims, I remember that on this church, the porch you're sitting on, that I was sitting here installing vinyl siding as the president flew over this church right here, going to Blacksburg from Roanoke, and I remember the airy feeling in the air, how everything was shut down, and you couldn't hear anything but those two helicopters carrying the president up toward Blacksburg. But that is what I remember, and that's how I feel like God blessed me. You talk about the Mustang. I thought my Mustang was done for. It had noises, clatters, and things like that. I went back home that afternoon, and I got in my Mustang. I cranked it up. It purred like a little kitten.
Wow.
It purred like a little kitten.
Yeah,
it purred like a little kitten. And I think when I got done driving it, I had 300,000 miles on a 4-cylinder engine. Okay, so
there you go.
So God helped me for that.
Yes, sir.
And I'd like to say that really all of this glory belongs to God.
You're
because
right.
I could have easily have been there, okay? The only thing I regret is I felt helpless, okay?
Yeah.
I felt like that I wished I could have helped somebody, but I couldn't. I remember stories that we had of one of the professors. He was a survivor of the Jewish Holocaust, and I remember one of the heroic stories of him in his classroom. At the time of these attacks, those classrooms, you couldn't even lock the doors from inside. You couldn't lock the doors from inside the classroom. You were helpless. And I remember that he used his body as a weapon and held the door shut and told his kids to jump out the second-story window. And as they jumped out the second-story window, they broke ankles and legs, and they jumped out as he had his back to the door. And only he got shot through the door, and another student got shot. Everybody else got out. That was a hero.
Yeah.
Okay? That was a hero. But nevertheless,
did he pass away from his wounds?
Yes. Yes, it was two of our professors. It was two of our professors that got shot in my department. None of our staff died, and none of our, quote, our departmental students died. These were other students from different departments and colleges in the university. But nevertheless, it was a very infamous day, and it's always stamped on my mind about the grace of God and the mercy of God, and sometimes how God works things, because it's just like I back up to get in my car into the brush pile. I was angry. God was doing me a favor, and I didn't know it.
And you were mad about it.
I was mad about it. But now, it's like everything else. A lot of times we don't know until we see the whole plan of God work out in our life.
That's right.
But I just thank God for his mercy, his grace, and everything he's given us.
I couldn't help but think when you were talking about sitting down at your dining room table on day 3, and you described that peace. We just aired an episode a couple of weeks ago about the peace of God and how it passes all understanding.
Yes.
I couldn't help but think about that, Andrew, when he's describing his story, and all of us have that experience, whether we've gone through something as traumatic as you went through or our own troubles, If we'll allow the Lord, if we'll just tarry and let him come in, he'll cover us up with that blanket of peace.
And his peace heals us.
Yes, sir.
It heals us.
It can fix everything that's wrong.
The university were offering me multiple chances to go to counselors for counsel, but the great counselor fixed it.
He was already there.
He was already there and fixed it.
3 days later.
But the one thing I do want to kind of back up a little bit is I ran from Norris Hall that day. I had a couple guys I work with. One was in a machine shop. One was in his desk. And as I went through there, I didn't realize myself really how the adrenaline was going, how fast things were going. But we were sitting in a funeral 3 days later, and one of them kind of chuckles a little bit. And I said, "What's wrong?" And he says, "We're laughing at you." He said, "When you came through, you were just a blear." And he said, when you opened the door, if you had not gotten that door open, he said you'd have plastered yourself and knocked yourself out.
Oh, my.
And I really didn't realize that.
No.
You know what?
Things happen quick.
God's so faithful. He's so good.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
He is.
Well, Brother Danny, this has been this has been an amazing story, and I'm so glad that we were able to come up here and hear it in person, and that's why Ryan and I are here.
Yep.
When we heard what had taken place in your life, I said, there are people right among us that God is doing amazing things for, and that's really what we want to do here on the podcast, is exploit the goodness of God. He's been good to the Reed family, but he's been good to many, many others.
Oh, yeah.
And so thank you for sharing your story with us.
Right. Yep. Thank you.
Good to have you.